This tree is extremely ugly, but it bears a fruit with a meaty taste, and when the fruit is ripe, it will actively remind you that it can be eaten. This is the strange thing the male protagonist produced with magic. Now, with the diligent work of the Dark Elves, the construction of the throne and conference room was completed in 2.5 days, and they even specially made a set of clothes. The male protagonist was overjoyed, finally not having to wear pajamas, although wearing them was no better than not wearing them. However, in the eyes of others, the protagonist is still a massive black mist. Then Arthur suggested establishing food production facilities first. Fighting on an empty stomach is impossible. Immediately after, he took out a tree with an extremely ugly appearance. Just a glance at it was terrifying. And as the saying goes, you can't judge a book by its cover, and the same goes for trees. Arthur explained that this thing can produce meat-flavored fruit and will be one of the main food sources in the future. Besides food, dormitories for management are also needed. Additionally, the urgent task is to acquire advanced technology, specifically military magic. General magic can at most be applied to attacks involving dozens of people, while military magic can be used in attacks involving thousands, and can even alter the terrain to gain an advantage. The old man felt it was incredible and couldn't help but feel excited despite his age. Finally, the protagonist decided to produce a hero to act as a fighter, since an army would require a lot of resources, magic, and maintenance costs, which they, just starting out, cannot afford.
At this moment, the old man was very curious about what a hero is.
Atu stated that Managura has several heroes under the king, who are both powerful and possess special abilities, and they are also crazed monsters. However, summoning a hero requires various conditions, but summoning just one can be achieved soon. At the same time, the protagonist's magic will levy a certain tax from the citizens, and the level of taxation is related to the citizens' happiness. However, what the protagonist does not know is that even the saintess in the human nation sensed the signs of a calamity in the great world through an oracle, and thus dispatched 2 holy knights and a group of mercenaries to investigate. At this moment, the protagonist is still immersed in the joy of the perfect construction of the house, feeling as if he is playing a game. Many buildings are completed on trees, which is the elf's area of expertise. Besides the houses, the planting of the meat trees is also going smoothly, and it is already time for harvesting. In addition, Emil also found a water source and eagerly led the protagonist to visit. But upon arrival, Emil was surprised to find that the once crystal clear water source had turned black. He was extremely disappointed and regretfully stated that the water was undrinkable. However, Artu said nothing and in front of everyone, took a small sip. Art explained that this is a cursed land, which is evidence of it becoming part of Minogura's territory. Then the protagonist asked them to take a deep breath, and they instantly felt refreshed.
The cursed land is beneficial for evil attributes, but has adverse effects on neutral and good attributes.
Now that the Dark Elves have become the protagonist's citizens, they naturally shifted from neutral to evil attributes, meaning this land is easier for them to live on. To further convince everyone, Artu immediately demonstrated his power, destroying countless trees in an instant. Additionally, Artu will grow stronger over time, and what he just showed was only 1% of his peak strength, and he is also one of the heroes. Upon hearing this, several people immediately expressed their willingness to swear allegiance unto death. However, the protagonist complained about why Artu had to destroy the forest to show his power, and thus punished Artu by making him stay overnight at the main house. The evil god protagonist never expected that despite secretly developing, he would still be discovered by the forces of justice, who then dispatched a large number of personnel to investigate. He originally intended to peacefully persuade these people to leave, but they insisted on entering the forest. So, Artu decided not to pretend anymore, and skewered them like candy fruit. The protagonist was still developing his forces at home, using the fruit of the meat tree to create a long-legged insect. Previously, using magic to produce was a last resort, but seeing the newly created life, the Dark Elves admired the protagonist even more. In addition, the protagonist plans to summon a hero. Queen of the Fistbugs, Isra, is an insect-type hero that Menagura is proud of. Of course, summoning Isra was a well-considered decision. On one hand, she has the ability to strengthen insect-type units, allowing the long-legged bugs to become frontline combat power. Besides that, she can also produce larvae to create labor force, whether for internal affairs or war. Isra can also exhibit extraordinary abilities. Of course, the most important thing is that the personalities of the other heroes are quite problematic. Most of them are troublemakers who like to conquer the world and create chaos. After all, the protagonist just wants to quietly develop. However, what he fears comes true, as the protagonist discovers armed groups are all ready. Approaching the forest, he hoped to avoid drawing attention as much as possible and let Atu peacefully drive them away. If
it doesn't work, that's another matter.
At this moment, 2 paladins and a group of mercenaries have already arrived at the forest, just as they are about to. As they were about to enter, they suddenly noticed the figure of a young girl, and it was none other than Atu.
Atu's every move is very polite, he stated.
I am a dark elf, and our people are fleeing. They entered the forest and are now living inside together, so there is nothing unusual in the forest.
The man wanted to say more, but was dissuaded by a look from Atu. He instantly understood the other party's meaning. That was giving their chance of survival. The man immediately ordered a retreat, but unexpectedly, there was a reckless team member. The Bond insisted on barging in, and even the mercenaries sided with him.
However, it was the stubbornness of the blonde that got all the mercenaries killed. The battle ended in an instant, and the blonde didn't even know what happened. By the time he came to his senses, Atu was already preparing a barbecue.